Trying to lose weight involves many health factors to be in line. The right diet, proper exercise, your thyroid metabolism must be working, not to mention the role your liver and adrenals play. All of these variables intertwine with each other. But what if you're stuck? Maybe that scale is just not moving the right way. This may be an indicator of something called metabolic syndrome. This is one of my favorite topics because there are so many solutions to this problem. Here to talk about some of those solutions is Sarah Burden. She is the national educator for an awesome company called Life Seasons. Welcome back to the show, Sarah.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be back.
Well, thanks so much for being here today because we get to talk about one of my favorite topics when it comes to weight loss. It's dealing with blood sugar, and not just anything blood sugar, but we're talking about metabolic syndrome. And that's why I wanted to bring you on, because I love what you're doing at Life Seasons. The knowledge that you have on this topic is superior, and that's why you're a great host to come onto the show and really be able to describe a little bit more and break this down for our audience. So let's start with this. Let's start with, what is metabolic syndrome?
So some people may have heard of metabolic syndrome, or sometimes it's called syndrome X. And another way to think about it is, okay, so we know that if your blood sugar levels are at this particular amount, your doctor will tell you that you're diabetic. And if you are in this range, now your doctor is going to talk to you about maybe being pre-diabetic. And before that, you might have syndrome X or metabolic syndrome, where if you don't make some changes pretty quickly, you might wind up going down the path where you do develop more serious blood sugar issues. So for people with metabolic syndrome, often it's the information that your doctor is getting is that you're having a harder time controlling your blood sugar and keeping it stable, along with a collection of other kind of symptoms or kind of health indicators. Often there is high cholesterol that goes with that. They call it hyperlipidemia, right? Your cholesterol levels might be too high. Your blood pressure might be too high. You might be storing your fat, your body fat around your waist in an area that kind of indicates your body is struggling with normal metabolic processes. And you might have other symptoms going on, being heavier than your doctor thinks is a good weight for your frame. So a collection
your
of
BMI.
Yeah, exactly. And we know there are problems with the BMI, but if you have a good healthcare provider who can kind of take into consideration like your bone structure and your muscle mass, oftentimes if you're working with a good integrative kind of healthcare provider, they can let you know this collection of symptoms indicates that you are headed down the road for trouble, basically.
That's exactly right, Sarah.
Yeah.
I think even in my practice with the clients I deal with, we see metabolic syndrome. It seems like 1 out of 3 people easily. And I think this is one of the biggest driving forces, especially for those of you who can't lose weight. That's a huge issue, is that you've got to be looking at those markers for metabolic syndrome. And like you said, the high cholesterol, the sugar problems, and that's what we need to talk about today. So in the medical system, if someone's labeled with metabolic syndrome, what's the medical system going to do?
Often people are put on drugs like metformin. They might be put on statin drugs to address the cholesterol. They might be put on blood pressure medications to address, the elevated blood pressure. And each of those has multiple side effects, right? That can be varying, right, of varying degrees. And none of them are addressing the underlying root cause, which is the benefit of working with somebody like you, or any kind of integrative health coach or health practitioner who's saying, all of these kind of branches all stem back to the same trunk, which is your body's having trouble with your hormones and your blood sugar balance, right? Insulin's a hormone, and all of it is, right? It's so entangled together with our stress hormones, our sex hormones, and that insulin hormone for helping how we use and store sugar, rather than turning it all into body fat, using it for energy. And when that is not functioning properly, we have this host of other ailments. And instead of just kind of trying to treat all of those individually, looking at that underlying cause.
Which for a lot of people, the blood sugar is is probably one of the best places to start in controlling your blood sugar. You mentioned hormones. I've always talked about, every one of my seminars presentation, I always go back to the hormone cortisol, because for a lot of people, this is our stress hormone. This is the one that puts us in fight or flight, right? When you're out in the woods and a bear's chasing you, that instigates that cortisol hormone. But for most of us, we bring that bear home, right? Imagine that bear living with you in your house. A lot of people are in this constant fight or flight that is causing blood sugar dysregulations. It can mess with their cholesterol. It's really the reason why a lot of people have trouble losing weight. So to me, the best place to start for most of us is control your blood sugar, because that's one of the best things you can do to control cortisol, your fight or flight hormone. So let's talk about ways of doing that. What's the first thing you tell people to do when it comes to controlling your blood sugar?
Well, and it's so interesting that you say that, because it's only been lately that I learned people have a craving for sugar when their cortisol spikes, because it can actually
Right.
tamp it down a little bit. So look at that vicious cycle that gets created.
Yes.
My body's producing
Yes.
cortisol too often. The solution that my brain and body come up with unconsciously is a sweet treat, because that kind of takes the edge off for just a moment, but creates bigger and bigger problems, right? And
It
so
does.
we have to have
No,
another solution for managing it other than more sweet treats, because it just exacerbates the problem.
it does exacerbate the problem. And that cortisol mechanism pushing your sugar up and down, like you said, every time that drops, we start getting those cravings. The body's sort of signaling, I need to eat. And that's not really, it's a hormone issue for most of us.
Yeah.
I know there's emotional eating, and that's a different topic. But for most of us, it's a hormone signaling that our blood sugar's dropping, I need to eat something. So
Yep.
we need to learn to be better at managing that, where we never really have that craving. And a great example I tell people is that most people have done some type of diet in their lifestyle, and what happens after you get past those first 3 to 5 days of any diet? Yes, and it's the hardest part and you feel like crap, but for most of you, your cravings go away. And
Mm-hmm.
that's because that's the first time in a long time you're probably controlling your blood sugar properly again. And that's a great best analogy I can come up with, because everybody sort of experienced that when they make a dietary change. But
Right.
so what diets do you like to promote usually when it comes to blood sugar?
I've gotten the chance to work with a lot of people, mostly women, in the last 15 or so years with healthy plans of eating, a kind of a balanced, healthy approach. And
Yes.
what has worked for me and for a lot of women that I know is a plan that's not very extreme. It's a little bit dorky sounding, it's a little bit square, but just, like having 3 balanced meals a day plus a snack, where all the food groups are represented. And so I don't do something extreme. And I have watched for most people that a very extreme, intense kind of plan often doesn't work long term.
I
Um,
agree.
yeah, but so for most people, having plenty of fiber, and there's great science to back that up, that if we can get close to the 50 grams of fiber a day mark, which is tough on the typical American diet, you really have to be consciously adding fiberful foods into
That's
your
right.
plan, right? But that you can consume sometimes the exact same foods plus fiber and have it not be such a hit to your blood sugar. You won't spike and crash the same way you would as if that fiber were removed. And so having
Yes.
plenty of fiber, plenty of whole foods. I really do advocate, like a lot of people do, when you shop the perimeter of the store versus the interior, when you're getting food the way it looks when it comes from nature, we're probably in a better state. And so I eat carbohydrates, but I love to have, like sweet potatoes, things like that. So it's in its most whole form. But
Yes.
I found that for me and for a lot of people I know, I stay full and satisfied without the big highs and lows to my blood sugar when I have protein plus fat plus veggies, plus carbohydrate, and then maybe my fruit at the end of the meal. There's some evidence for that too, that if we start the meal with the protein and quality fat and veggies, that if you have carbohydrate and fruit as well, towards the end of the meal, your body is already a little bit more prepped and a little bit more buffered to kind of handle and manage that blood sugar instead of having those extreme highs and lows.
You said a lot of awesome things, Sarah. There's so much there as far as if people pick up on. So I think it's important to stress those points again. Fiber, like you said, is very good at controlling blood sugar. And it's also good for cholesterol, which is another one of those risk factors for metabolic syndrome. So two birds, one stone there. But
Yeah.
you're right, trying to get up to 50 grams a day would be awesome if most of America would do that. I don't think we would have a type 2 diabetic problem.
Probably not.
That's important. And any diet that's extreme, it's only temporary for most of us. I do agree with you 100% that just balanced dieting, that really is the way to go. And just trying to cut out a lot of the processed and white foods that we're consuming too much of. That's really what's creating a lot of our blood sugar dysregulations in the first place. So I love the balanced diet approach. I think that's one of the best ways to go. So let's talk nutritionally then. What is our body, or what can we take nutritionally for our body to control blood sugar better?
Yeah, you know what? And this is a fascinating category because there are a lot of traditional ingredients that are proven by science. This is my favorite aspect of health and nutrition. I think you're probably the same way too. When there's an ingredient that's been used for maybe 2000 years, and then there's modern science that says, oh, this works specifically in this pathway in the body, I'm always like, yes, I love
Yes,
that.
that's right. I do too. I love the science.
Yeah, I love when it's proving something that traditional people have been saying for generations and generations, right? It's super cool.
For a long time.
Yeah.
Yes.
So cinnamon, the right form of cinnamon, can absolutely help keep your blood sugar levels more stable. It can help promote the body using insulin to bring blood sugar glucose from the bloodstream into the cells to be burned as fuel. There's an herb called Gymnema sylvestre, and the name in Sanskrit translates to sugar destroyer. And I actually met a woman in the aisle at a health food store in Baltimore, and she said her family was from the islands in Eastern India, in the Pacific Islands there. And she said that this was a part of their native culture, and that they would make, before a big banquet, these little patties that they would eat beforehand that were made with that Gymnema plant, because then you wouldn't overeat so much at the big feast, because it temporarily turns off your sugar receptor sites on your tongue.
It does.
Great indication from science that it might be doing the same thing all throughout the digestive tract, starting in the mouth, all through your whole digestive tract, to help your body uptake a little bit less sugar and maybe crave sugar a little bit less from the foods you're eating.
I think that's a great trick for kids too, Sarah. Is the Gymnema, if get the liquid form of Gymnema and put a drop or two on their tongue before they have that candy bar or something.
Oh, wow.
It tastes like cardboard to them when they actually do it at that. So you just got to remember to give it to them before they have the candy bar, not afterwards. Yeah,
right,
that's the hard part.
Yeah.
But it's a great way, like you said, to turn those receptors of sugar off for just about 45 minutes, and it makes things taste differently. So for the psychological point of that, I think it's a great tool to use.
Absolutely.
What other herbs are good for blood sugar controlling?
Bitter melon has been looked at for blood sugar control. Some different minerals, trace minerals like chromium and vanadium have been looked at. So there is a whole host of ingredients that really do help support the body's natural process, because your body wants to take the glucose that's created from the foods that you eat, move it into the cells at the right speed, so it's not hanging out in the bloodstream, causing inflammatory damage, wreaking havoc throughout your system, but that it should be shuttled into the cells pretty quickly, burned and used as fuel, or stored appropriately, like in the liver as glycogen, so that it can be called on later in a moment like when a bear would be chasing you, when you have that fight flight kind of moment where you have those stores immediately available. But the body wants to be doing things sort of in that orderly fashion. But when we're sort of not feeding it the right things, or inundating it with too much sugar. So here's another part I left out of that healthy plan of eating talk. I really advocate not eating foods that have sugar added in the top 5 ingredients. For me, I don't eat any added sugar, but if you are going to have sweet treats, sometimes you will be surprised at how much differently you eat those sweet treats when you aren't getting that sort of like incidental hidden sugar in your bread, in your ketchup, even mustard, in salad dressing, in cereal, in almond milk. You can get so many grams of hidden sugar that you aren't even aware of. It causes you to want to eat more of the serving of food and be hungrier later. And your body is also then just trying to process sugar all day long. And I think if more people chose a bread and a ketchup and salad dressing and soup with no added sugar, then when you do want a special sweet treat, you don't even want that much, because your palate is different, your body is different, and so a little bit could be satisfying, instead of the way that we do things now, which is just tons of hidden sugar.
I know it's everywhere. It really is. You're exactly right. And that's why I at least try to tell people to make sure you have some protein and fat with every meal if you can.
Yeah.
Because we understand that protein stabilizes sugar and fat stabilizes insulin. So things like nuts and, good protein sources are a great way to really try to manage that sugar from going up and down. I never allow my clients to have a fruit even by itself. Because we know when, like you said, those added sugars, or even a banana that has a lot of sugar in it, when you consume that, all you're doing is raising your blood sugar when you eat it by itself. And 30 minutes later, it's going to do what? It's going to crash on you, causing more cortisol to rise, and this vicious cycle now begins. And so it's about trying to make sure we got some protein and fat. Those little tricks make a huge difference. For so many people, we don't always have to change what we're eating. We need to change how we're eating it. And that can really make a big impact in the beginning to control some of those sugar cravings we're dealing with. Another great herb I know it's out there, and I know Life Seasons has a product called Glucose Stability that has a lot of these minerals and things you're talking about, but it also has another herb called fenugreek in it.
Yeah.
One of my favorite herbs. So tell me what fenugreek does for the blood sugar.
So one element that I know about how fenugreek works is that it seems to work in the digestive tract, in the gut, right? Helping the body sort of metabolize sugar more slowly and sort of providing maybe almost like a fiber benefit, that it's helping buffer and mitigate how the sugar is hitting the bloodstream. But I bet you know more about fenugreek than I do.
No, you're right. Fenugreek's a fascinating herb for me too, because I know we use it to help increase testosterone a lot of times too, because it does work in the liver. It helps, like you said, the digestive tract of how we metabolize those sugars. We know that people with metabolic syndrome, the biggest issue they're having is they can't get sugar into the cell properly.
Right.
And so that's really what's happening. The cells are not open. And fenugreek, chromium, gymnema, all these fascinating things you've talked about, are all beneficial for helping that glucose molecule get in there. But let me tell you, I don't mean to digress here, but a funny story about fenugreek. I've been taking large doses of fenugreek for a long time because I love the liver support it really gives you and the glucose stability. Mm-hmm. And so what I did not know is that a lot of fenugreek can make your skin smell like maple syrup.
I knew that's what you were going to say. I used it when I was nursing my daughter. And so anybody who's used it for that, they will know you smell like pancakes.
That's why babies smell like pancakes or maple syrup. And I always thought that was the funniest thing because my wife kept saying, you smell like maple syrup. And I was like, I don't eat maple syrup. I don't know where it's coming from. And finally, I read a story I think it was outside of New York City, basically. They had a fenugreek factory that had opened up and the whole town was complaining that it smelled like maple syrup all the time. And so they had a huge investigation only to come to find out that it was fenugreek that was causing that odor. So
isn't it
very
funny
story, but it is. I thought it was a funny story, but overall, fenugreek's a great herb for helping those cells really uptake that glucose too. So a lot of great things. Why would you add Gotu-Kola to a blood sugar pill?
So the Gotu-Kola is there for circulatory support primarily, because most people who are dealing with elevated blood sugar also are dealing with eye health being deteriorated. Oftentimes an ophthalmologist or someone who's examining your eye might be the first person to become aware that your body is having difficulty managing blood sugar because they see a lot more capillary formation as the body is working harder and harder and trying to make alternate pathways to have circulation to the eye. That's why bilberry is included in the Life Seasons glucose stability formula. Isn't that neat? And that to me is one of the things that I love about working for Life Seasons is that as a company, the team of experts who put together this formula, glucose stability, knows what's going on in the body of somebody who's dealing with blood sugar imbalance. And they are addressing things that customer in the aisle may have no idea. They may not be thinking about their eye health at all, but we know if your blood sugar has been out of range, frequently, your eyes have probably taken a toll. And so the bilberry is included because that is an herb, a fruit, cousin of the blueberry that has been demonstrated to have benefit for eye health. Gotu-Kola is in because often people deal with diabetic neuropathy, right? People who have blood sugar issues have circulatory issues. And most of us know an older relative who would complain either of pains or have even had more intensive surgery sometimes and even amputations for that poor circulation that happens because of the blood sugar issues. Gotu-Kola is a great herb for helping strengthen the capillary support and help with circulation throughout the body.
When you control your blood sugar, you control a lot of things, especially cortisol. That fight or flight hormone, when you control cortisol, which is really the hormone that sort of signals to store that belly fat, that hard belly fat a lot of people can't get past, you control that hormone, you control a lot of things, including your weight. Mm-hmm. So let's move into that side of it then. What if we got our blood sugar control, we're eating better now. What about our metabolism? What if we just want to just really try to increase our metabolism up a little bit? What would we do for that?
Yeah. And metabolism is another kind of tricky, delicate thing to balance in the body. It's always great to work with somebody like you or another kind of integratively minded health coach or health practitioner, because it can be different for every person's body. But there are some things that we could do sort of as a first line, simple entry way to kind of cover all the bases and make sure we're nourishing our body and taking care of some of the kind of foundational elemental aspects of a healthy metabolism. And so the Life Seasons formula we have for this is called Metabolism. And
How
such an easy
convenient.
name. Yeah, you'll know right where to find it. And so metabolism does really address blood sugar as well. So this one is acknowledging that, without a stable blood sugar, you're not going to get the results that you're looking for. So there are a lot of ingredients in metabolism that do address a healthy blood sugar, but it also addresses energy levels, because sometimes when our body feels fatigue, the message that our cells send to the brain is more food, real quick, right? Fast fuel, because we're feeling fatigued. Sometimes we are not getting to the results that we want to because our thermogenesis, right, or the rate at which our body is burning that food as fuel is set too low. So there are ingredients in the formula that kind of stoke that fire and help with the thermogenesis. The thing that I thought was really sweet and cool about this formula, I just talked to Darren, our founder, the other day, and he mentioned that they put into the formula L-theanine and theobromine and the Andean cocoa extract into this formula, not only for the metabolic benefit, not only for the blood sugar benefit, but for the mood and mental state that it puts people into, that the formulators put in those three very uplifting, calming, centering, kind of validating sort of ingredients, because they said, when you think that you need to lose weight, you don't feel good about yourself. And so you have to change that right away, or you're going to be harmful in the attempts that you make, right? You might be more punitive, you might punish your body, you might restrict to the point that it's not healthy. So if you can put your brain into the state of like, you know what, I'm okay, I'm just going to make some healthier choices, we are so much more likely to stick with good, positive, affirming, healthy choices instead of this like that diet culture, that punishing mentality. So when he said that, it just about made me cry. I thought it was so sweet to hear that they had thought about this person who's standing in the aisle in front of the diet pill section and what they're feeling about themselves. And they wanted to immediately help improve and uplift their spirit so that they could be making happy, healthy, positive choices instead of feeling, that
it's another great example of how you looked at it from a multi-system point of view of, what is metabolically, what are our challenges when we're trying to lose weight. And that's what I love about, again, what Darren and Life Seasons doing is just phenomenal. And especially the education you're putting out there to let people know, hey, this is clinically researched. There's great stuff out there that you can do to make changes in your health. I know even green coffee bean, you got that in there to help, that's got a lot of great research behind it in weight loss, green tea extract. So a lot of great ingredients in this to really help sort of stoke that fire, like you said, and increase that metabolic range. And I just love this product. So could you take both of these together, metabolism and glucose stability?
These both have very hefty therapeutic doses of chromium in them. And so I wouldn't stack them together. You would go over the recommended daily upper limit of chromium, but some people take a partial dose of each so that they get, some of the coverage of both of those blends of ingredients, or people flip-flop days sometimes.
I'll say it from a nutritional point of view. I think if you're going to choose one or the other, start with glucose stability.
I agree.
Control your blood sugar first. Once you get that under control, then we can start increasing our metabolism, with exercise, with, metabolism products like Life Seasons has. Then we can get into that next phase. So I think the body sort of does have a priority system in its own way, and controlling blood sugars first and foremost, even though there's chromium in the metabolism product. I love the formula that glucose stability really provides, and hitting it from multi-system point of view. So awesome products, Sarah. You're a wealth of information as always. Thanks for coming back onto the show here. And I definitely want to look forward to talking to you in the future.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me back.
All right, Sarah, you have a great day.
Take care.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Healthy Approach podcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you like this podcast, and help us spread the word by rating and sharing with your friends and family. If you'd like to learn more about the products we discussed today, go to sunflowershop.com. That's shop with two P's and an E, or visit us at one of our 2 locations in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.